Okay. Okay, my name is Lauren. Allison and I helped to put on this event with Bill and Marcine. We just thought it would be really great to just update everybody on what's going on in the world right now with Corona and the escrow and title side of things, because everyone doesn't seem to know answers and we're just trying to feel our way out through everything. So this is our little presentation. So we have Bill, who is the VP Los Angeles County Manager at Cal Title. He's been in the title industry since 1987. He specializes in residential resale, commercial, and probate and trust work. Oh, I'm muting everybody else. Sorry. Let me see how I do this. Hold on. Mute.
Just mute all, but I'll mute myself.
Yeah, if everyone can mute themselves really quick. Good idea. Oh, sorry. Is everyone muting themselves? Is that better? Can everyone? Okay, I think we're good. So, and then Marcine is our branch manager of our Sherman Oaks, Glen Oaks escrow office, and she has over 40 years in the industry. And she also specializes in residential, commercial, trust sales, probate, conservatorships, both court and independent administration of estate act transactions. So we're gonna go ahead and start, and then if anybody has questions along the way, we're gonna stop after each topic. And if you want, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll be reviewing that every topic that we go through. So we're gonna go ahead and start. Okay, here we go, some statistics for us.
Yeah, so I want to start out a little bit. My name is Bill Thomas. Thanks for joining us this afternoon during your lunch hour. I appreciate that. I wanted to talk a little bit about what was going on just before COVID-19 hit. So we were having actually a really good year in 2020. As you can see, this is statistics for the month of March from last year to this year. At the county recorder, and you can see that we were well ahead of how many documents we're recording at the LA County recorder this year in 2020 of March. And even with COVID probably affecting us somewhere around the line of March 16th, around there 19th, we were still well ahead of 2019. And we were looking at about 4 to 6% growth in our industry, and it showed by just how many documents were being recorded this time in March of 2020. I don't have April's records yet for the county recorder, but I'm going to assume they kind of went down. But the actual refinances have stayed strong during this time because of the historic low refinance rates. And so we're assuming they're going to be somewhere around 100,000, 110,000 in recording in April, but it's still far below what we did in April of 2019. But if we go to the next screen, I want to show you what's kind of happened to our industry of what we do, single family residences, including condominiums in LA County. So some of the records that we compiled, we showed that we were still up in March of 2020 as opposed to March 2019. Almost about 300 transactions in LA County in that realm of residential sales. But if we go to the next screen, kind of starts falling apart here. Let's go to the next screen. So all of a sudden you could see we almost fell down about 50%, somewhere around 40 some odd percent from last year of April 2019 as compared to April 2020. So as you know, we're feeling it, everybody's feeling it. We're all of a sudden with COVID-19, business stopped. Some of the transactions that were in process of escrow, or not escrow, but being listed, got pulled back. I think some escrow transactions canceled. Marcine could speak of that. Marcine, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in March, we were having somewhat of a blockbuster. Last few months had been very, very big. There are a lot of openings. It was pretty consistent. I'm sure throughout our company, Glen Oaks is covering a lot of territory in Southern California, from Valencia all the way down to San Diego. These stats are kind of indicative year over year of where we are. And today, San Diego has picked up the most, with Los Angeles County in general trailing as down 50% still. So what we saw was kind of a tsunami level of cancellations in March. Things had been opening, but yet there were tremendous amount of cancellations in March, just trying to clear those out so we could kind of get back to business and process whatever escrows were in the house where people were committed. And the projections for our escrow statistics, our company, we were down year over year by 18.5% in March, but we had really anticipated huge numbers compared to 2019. In April, company-wide, we were down 58.9% in openings, and May, as of the 26th, which was yesterday, the openings are down 34% year over year from 2019. However, again, this is just as of yesterday, and things have improved, which I would just attribute to being stabilized. The cancellations that happened all spiked in March. Things are more or less, air quote, back to business. However, what that means is just simply that the numbers are way down. We're not seeing a lot of listings that are coming on the market. The agents that are on this call can maybe speak a little bit about like what's happening and how they're supposed to be showing property, because it's really changed. A lot of these things have come down from CAR with expectations on how properties are to be shown if they're vacant or if there is someone living in them. I know from my perspective, I probably right now would not want people walking through my house without certain protections being taken. So that's kind of what we're looking at for statistics.
Okay, so do we have any questions on statistics or what we've seen the last few months? I didn't see any in the chat. Anybody?
I have a question. Because of what happened, I think yesterday with LA County and more of California actually entering into the next phase and things opening up a little bit, has the CAR changed or announced what they're going to do with regards to how houses can be shown and things like open houses and how back to normal that part of it will be?
I think that's a real estate agent question. Does anybody who's on the chat that's real estate, like Gail or Brian, or I can't see who all is participating. Perhaps one of you can unmute. Gail?
Well, I'm sure Nancy and Brian and all the other agents can agree. We're still not allowed to do open houses, and we have what's called a PEAD, a coronavirus property advisory and declaration, entrance and advisory and declaration, and it keeps changing. In fact, today we're getting a new one from what I understand. And so as far as what I've heard as of yesterday, nothing's changed. We still can show homes. It used to be that we can only have 2 people from the same household in the house with 1 agent. Now that's changed. You can have I think up to 10. I'm not sure of the exact amount, but they don't have to be from the same household. But they have to sign what's called this PEAD, a property entry advisory. And they have to have a mask, and they have to make sure that they have to like sign off that they don't have a fever. And I mean, from what I hear, it's still the same. We cannot do open houses. We could still do showings. We just can't do open houses. Brian, you want to join in on that one?
I think you got it all. No open houses is still, we're doing a lot of virtual open houses on the listings, which are actually getting a lot of activity, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't know if there's a limit on the number of buyers that can come in for a showing, but it's a buyer's group. So it was 2, like Gail said, but now it's just the buyer's group can come in as long as they all sign the PEAD. And that's pretty much it. And when it's tenant occupied, the tenant has to sign off on allowing people in. So the owner has to get the tenant's acceptance of having people to go through their property.
Makes sense.
We actually have a link that our boss Joe posted in the chat as well that we'll send in the follow-up, just for everyone to have the COVID update, so everyone can have that on hand. Any other questions before we move on?
Okay, so what to expect during escrow, what delays we're experiencing, that's kind of be the next topic. Bill and I are going to kind of take turns on this with notary issues. That's really an interesting topic right now because California has loosened their rules on RON, which is remote online notaries. And I'm going to have Bill speak to that because he's an expert in that. Bill?
Yeah, and I want to back up a little bit about the notary situation. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but I think sometime May 6th around there, Gavin Newsom signed an emergency order that allowed the notaries that have expired to continue on for 60 more days. I think during this COVID time. So we're allowed under that emergency order to accept an expired notary in this time frame. Of course, they got to cite the actual emergency order. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's N95 of some sort. Maybe that's the mask, I think, but I'm getting it mixed with the order. But in any event, there is an order out there that allows expired notaries to continue on working during this time if their notary expired during this time frame. So I just want to bring that up a little bit. So some of the challenges we have, of course, are getting notaries done face-to-face, and the county recorders accepting certain electronically signature documents. So I want to kind of talk a little bit of history. Let's go back to the other screen. So a little history on what happened. So before COVID-19 hit, in January, the Department of Justice of California cleared the way to actually have electronic signatures acceptable here in California, but it was going to be done through an IPAN. An IPAN meant in-person electronic notary. So basically the person would still show up in front of the notary, and that person would get notarized by a notary, but the difference was that the notary was going to actually notarize a person not on paper, but on actual, in a computer format. So you would actually sign on an iPad type thing, and your signature would get fixed to the computer document as opposed to paper out document. So that was the process we were in. It's kind of got taken to a backseat. It was going to be the talk of the town because all of a sudden we have electronic signatures being acceptable. It was going to be delivered to the county recorder electronically and accepted and recorded electronically. Well, all of a sudden, RON is now on the forefront because of what's going on. People don't physically want to go in front of a notary and get notarized. The problem with that, though, is the Department of Justice does not allow a notary here in California to perform a RON. So RON is remote online notarization. So you can actually perform a notary from one place and in one area, maybe like Orange County, and someone could be somewhere else, like in Nevada, to do those notarizations. So, but the county recorder has cleared a path of accepting RON documents. And what I mean is they have to be from states that are allowed to do RON. So some states that are allowed to do RON are like Nevada, Washington, Utah, Texas, and then Virginia. And I'll explain a little bit about Virginia because they have some special notary processes during RON. So RON, I will tell you this, if it can be done, we'll have to start from the lender. There's a lot of hurdles to clear, and the lender is the first hurdle to clear. So if a lender does not accept the RON document, and they'll say it in their lender's instructions that they don't accept RON or electronic signature documents, then the battle's over. So it doesn't even matter if it's the lender's document or if it's the seller's document. If they say no to it, we can't close that transaction. In any event, if we get beyond that hurdle, the next hurdle, of course, is finding out who is approved to do RON. So someone from another state can do RON, someone from Nevada, someone from Texas can do RON. And if that person gets notarized by a proper RON notary, then we can accept that. But the next hurdle is can that RON person perform the RON for an insurance company? So a title insurer is going to want to make sure that the software they carry is acceptable to us. There's 8 different softwares that different title insurers are allowing us to accept. 2 of the most popular ones are Pavaso and Notarize.com. And it's kind of important that we have those softwares because of the fact that the software that they carry is facial recognition and also the ability to confirm an ID. So that's why it's important for us as title insurers to make sure they have the right software. So once we can do that, then we can actually verify if the county recorder in California is accepting RON. So many of them, as I said earlier, are accepting the RON document that's coming from another state. Right now we know LA, Orange County, San Diego, Ventura, and Santa Barbara, virtually all the Southern California counties are accepting RON documents from another state. Now, one of the things is lenders like Wells Fargo are not accepting RON documents. So if you have a lender involved, such as Wells Fargo, that doesn't accept RON documents, that's out the picture anyways. There's also another format that, people still here in California don't want to see people face to face. There's still the fear of the COVID. So they can actually do a RON as well if they can contact somebody from Nevada or Texas that can do that RON signature. The only thing is that type of signature or that type of format is not acceptable by Fannie Mae standards. So California property that's involved with an actual person signing from California is not acceptable from Fannie Mae. So we got to be real careful about that. Like I said, there's a lot of criteria with RON. It's starting to pick up a lot of traction. It's very fluid right now. It's changing as it goes along. Even in fact, the Department of Justice of California was talking about RON coming back into the picture in 2022. Now they're talking about it coming back much sooner, sometime maybe this year. So that may get approved in California where notaries could do RON. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. That's one of the things that we're trying to deal with county recorders where people don't want to see face to face. Now going with Virginia, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Those notaries have special authorities. They can notarize people that are outside the country. So if someone's in a different country and stuck and they need a RON notary or a RON document performed, those notaries in Virginia can do that. The caveat though is that the person who is signing the document must be a US citizen. That's how we can confirm that they are the actual person in the identification. So that's the caveat. So if you have a situation where someone's out of the country, there's a lot of embassies shut down still all over the countries, all over the world. And Virginia notaries can do RON if that person, he or she's a seller or he or she's a buyer and is a US citizen, we can perform that, or that can be performed and we can ensure that. That's with RON, and that's what we're talking about with what's going on right now with RON.
Thank you. We have one more notary slide and then we'll do the questions after. I see Wendy has a question.
Actually, I also have a couple comments.
Yeah.
In March, I closed a transaction where the seller was in China and their embassies had been closed for months and months. And it became like this huge issue because like there was no place and they couldn't fly here because you remember we've still got restrictions on people coming into the country. And they did use a remote online notary out of Virginia and that did record. So that's one piece I wanted to share. Bill's comment about American citizenship is really critical. Two questions, Bill, on this slide. Do all California counties accept RON under the terms that you've mentioned?
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know that yet. We're still learning. Like I said, it's very fluid. There have been what we call MOUs with the service recording provider that have been provided to all the people who are submitting recordings that allow for electronic recordings, and that's also being allowed by the county in California. As we understand it, if they can do an e-recording, they shall accept it. But we right now only know of the ones I just talked about as being acceptable for California counties.
And then my last question at this point is, for example, I'm a notary, but I'm certainly not RON approved. Do you know anything about how normal regular notaries, Lauren's a notary, Allison's a notary, Sarah's a notary, many of us are notaries. Do you know how any of us get RON approved?
Well, I can tell you this right now, you won't be able to get RON approved because you're a California notary. So right now it's not acceptable for a California notary, only out of state.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. So one of the things though, to see who can do a RON notary, the person should have an actual seal that said that this was performed under remote online notarization. And that should be affixed to the document. That's how we can tell, and that's how the county recorder can tell that it's been performed by a RON, a remote online notarization.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So Glen Oaks Escrow owns a national signing service that is in all over the United States, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, by the name of Mosaic. Your clients can just go online. I know there's a lot of attorneys online who've asked me in the past, like, how do we get access to, notaries? Is anybody doing online notaries? So I think Bill has explained that part, but we do own a service. They have been operational this entire time. We do have very, very stretched, limited notaries like on hand all over, because a lot of our regular notaries that have been going out seeing people, they're not actually working right now, and they haven't been working since mid-March because they either have family members at home that are a little bit at risk, and people just don't want to take chances. But we always use Mosaic as a backup, and they've come through every single time, which has been wonderful for us. So just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Okay, we're gonna go through some questions. Wendy had a question for Bill. Do you think the county recorder's office will be fine with the expired notary so long as the legend is there?
Yes, as long as they put they refer to the emergency order. They have to refer to it in the document where they notarize the document. They will accept that notary expiration. But remember, it can't be someone who's expired in 2019 or January. It has to be within this time that COVID has been in existence. So it would have to be somewhere around March 15th and on. So they will accept that as long as you place that, you refer back to the order, emergency order.
And Millie, our basically head of operations of Glen Oaks, said the language the notary needs to use is the notary commission extended pursuant to executive order N-63-20. So it's close to the mask.
Yes, not N95, sorry.
So that's in there. So if you want to just copy and paste that, we can also include that in the follow-up. Okay, Kim has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the first screen that you talked about with the RON notaries. You said California's recognizing it for if the notary is out of state, but not for deeds conveying or not for documents conveying an interest in the property. And then when you went to the second screen, you didn't have that same disclaimer. So I just want to clarify, if you're doing, and I'm an attorney, not a realtor, so the only thing I really care about from this perspective is things like deeds. Yeah. So if I understood your slides, you cannot use a RON for a deed. Is that correct?
Well, that's actually for a California notary. So that portion was talked about as far as for a California notary. So a RON cannot be accepted or cannot be performed by a California notary. And okay. At the time, this is why we were talking about IPEN. Realistically, the Department of Justice of California wasn't even going to talk about RON in California at that point until 2022. Well, COVID hit, so a lot of things changed, and all of a sudden the county recorder started saying that, as long as it's acceptable in a state, or I should say they're approved in a state to do RON, somewhere like Nevada, somewhere like Texas, somewhere like Virginia, they're going to accept that document at the county recorder. But a California notary cannot do that. So okay. That's what that's for about.
Okay, so okay, thank you. You also mentioned, now this may be for the lender side of it, so you also mentioned whether title insurers will accept it as a RON or whether Fannie Mae and Freddie and those people. So I've done estate planning documents that include deeds transferring property into the trust. I've had RONs in Nevada do all the documents, but I didn't have them do the deed because I was sort of freaked out, and I talked to Marcine about it and she wasn't sure. So I told my client, go find yourself a notary for that one document. Are you saying we could, if it's just a transfer and I certainly wouldn't have a Fannie or Freddie problem there. Maybe have a title issue, a title insurance issue, but I should be safe to do that if it's done by a Nevada Ron enabled notary.
Yes, if it's done outside of the transaction before a transaction that's happened, that should be acceptable as long as it's done by a notary out of state that is authorized or approved to do a Ron notary. So they should be able to do that, and that should not impact your future transaction. So the future transaction, the transaction that we're involved with, say we're doing a purchase and Fannie Mae guidelines, or in this case, Wells Fargo, because it's well known that Wells Fargo won't accept the Ron. They say in their lender's instructions, we can't accept the Ron. So none of those documents in that current transaction can be done as a Ron.
Okay, and for you mentioned, and I didn't catch how fast which ones you were talking about different Ron programs being acceptable. That's also only from the lender side. That's not from the county side. They're not going to care, right?
That's actually from our title insurer side. So there needs to be an approved software system, and there's like 8 of them, but 2 of the most popular right now are Pavaso and Notarize.com. And I bring that up because it's very important that they have to be approved software because of the facial recognition that the software has, and also the identification recognition that the software has. So it's real important for us as a title insurer. The county recorder doesn't care.
Okay.
The title insurer we're the ones that care.
Okay, Lauren or Marcine, can you send out a list of who those approve as part of the follow-up? Tell us who those software people are if you get that from Bill or somewhere.
Yeah, and just a couple points on what Kim was saying. Kim, when I accepted that document from Virginia, which was from a seller who could not get to an embassy, that was a deed. But you asked me about that from a state-to-state standpoint. Honestly, until I've been talking to Bill about this last couple of days, really, I've had no one use that as a format, so I didn't know if that would fly.
Yeah. No. I told all my clients, these days, who knows what's going to happen and who knows what they're going to get recorded. We'll just do them and we'll keep their fingers crossed. But I've been, doing a trust is different from doing a deed in terms of who's going to look at from the recording.
I do remember you asking me that, but I have never heard of people using it state to state and all these separate requirements. So yeah,
so maybe it's safer to just not do the Ron for that.
There you go. But according to Bill, obviously that's why we're all here. This totally works, which is why this is great information.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
And one of the things I want to point out too is that this is fluid. So a lot of it keeps changing at the county recorder level, at the title insurer level. So it keeps changing. So if you do have any kind of transaction that's going to involve Ron, you should contact us first so we can determine if we can even perform that transaction.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
We have a follow-up. I didn't catch this earlier. Wendy just wanted to know for the language used for an expired notary, does it have to be in the document or only on the notary page?
It has to be on the notary page.
Okay.
And I believe it has to be right next to the seal.
Wendy, if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to unmute. Okay. I think we're good. Any other questions on notaries before we move on? Okay.
Okay. Hey, everybody. So what I'm finding, can you switch off the pictures so I can actually talk about this stuff? What we're finding is that when this whole thing first hit with COVID, the court system shut down, at least on the probate side. So there are a couple of probate real estate agents on the call with us today. We have not had any court confirmations or sales that had taken place. Some of the transactions that sold in February have been pushed out to late September for court confirmation. So if there's not full authority of the signer, if there's not full authority of the signer, it's going to be very hard to get an escrow closed in a timely manner. It will get closed if there's court confirmation, but the hearings for decedents' estates are very, very low priority. So the things that would be higher is family law and things that go on with abuses, criminal law, et cetera, et cetera. where they absolutely have to hear these things. Notice of proposed action and for full authority sale are able to close within 30 days after after an escrow is opened. They do have a notice of proposed action, which is what we're talking about, like takes about 15 days to notify all the heirs of the sale. But generally those kinds of transactions, even if they're all cash, can be closed like 20 to 30 days from acceptance of an offer. Go ahead and switch, Lauren. Yeah, okay. So this is another thing I found very, very challenging. I have a lot of people that ask us to record accommodation documents. The Hall of Records, just like our offices all throughout Southern California, is actually closed to the public. So what I did not realize is we have a service that was probably referred by you, Bill, many years ago that's been super reliable to record documents. And what I didn't realize is they went in daily in person to all these halls all throughout actually the United States. And with the shutdowns of the Hall of Records, they've been doing mail-ins. And Bill, I'm gonna have you explain about that, but I sent them a document March 13th by overnight. Thank God it was one of the last things I did. They got it on the 16th. And by the time it showed up, and thank God it was not an emergency, it didn't record till May 6th. So it's a very low priority. I think there's still a lot of, like Bill was saying, refi business being transacted. We may have the same number of closings, but the ratio from refi to sale has just grown exponentially. Where, you know, I might close 35 or 40 sales in a month and 3 refis. Now I'm closing like 18 or 20 refis and, you know, a dozen sales. So that's become a huge issue with these halls of records being closed. And some of the halls, as Bill's going to explain, are just closed. They don't have electronic recording options because that's the only option we have right now. And I think, and maybe Bill, you can explain this a little better than I can, a lot of these people from the hall are actually working from their homes. So we're actually seeing a lot more pulled recordings for really random reasons that don't make a lot of sense to us. We've never seen that before. Bill, can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, actually that's complicating the matter. They're not working from home. They've been sent for home. So there's people that are in categories that either age group or maybe someone citing that they have some underlying health issues. So the counties have sent those people home. In LA County, right now they're working with a 65% staff because of that issue. So the challenge with that is keeping up with the electronic recordings that are being submitted by all title insurance or all the submitters, and then the daily mail. And as Marcine said, she sent in a document in mid-March and didn't get recorded till, I think you said May, right?
May 6th.
So that's about right, because right now the county recorder in LA is taking about up to 6 weeks for recordation of mail-in documents. And some service like the one that you used doesn't have the ability to issue, or I should say electronically record, because they don't have the agreement or the contract with the service provider and the county recorder, so they have to mail in those documents. And so some of those documents or some of those recorders don't even have the ability to do e-recording. So small ones like Sierra, in fact, actually Sierra is the only recorder that is closed outright. You have to mail in your documents. Other small county recorders that are up north, they're taking in drop-off mail from the title service companies, and they're taking either a day or two to record them. But the larger county recorders are on e-recording. In fact, actually, Alameda, which is a pretty large county recorder, was recently just doing mail-in and drop-off recordings, but they've actually have changed their technology in like the last week or two and got onto the system to e-record. So we're now able to e-record in Alameda County. But some of the smaller counties up north, they're just having drop-offs and it's taking a day or two to record. So we can't issue the policy until that actual recordation takes place. We do have some gap coverage, but it depends on what county that it's in and what kind of systems we have to be able to track any documents that are being recorded on a daily matter in those counties. So that's a challenge. In fact, getting certified copies from the county recorder or any kind of prints or anything like that, vitals, we cannot get from the county recorder right now because they're closed to the public. I just did find out yesterday that Sacramento and San Joaquin has opened up to the public, but there's been no talk about any of the Southern California county recorders opening up anytime soon. So that's a fluid situation as well, but right now, so far, they're closed and there's no talk about reopening them at this point. So that's a challenge with that.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? So,
Sure.
If you're doing a refinance or a sale, and you have an escrow and title insurance, you can record electronically.
Correct.
So, but accommodations, that type of thing, transferring properties into a trust, et cetera, or even an affidavit death of trustee or joint tenant, that would have to be done by mail essentially at this point.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So to continue on with some of the challenges that we have with the county entities being closed, like the courts. So I think we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. So, you know, if there's not a court order already issued, or there's one that is issued, but we can't obtain it, we're going to have to wait till the court opens. We're just having no ability to pull those documents. And if we actually have to pull maybe a complaint or maybe even a petition to see what exactly went on in the case, we can't even pull those documents at the county or at the courts right now because they're closed. Some of the challenges too is if you're in the midst of a court order and there's some change that someone goes in to actually do an ex parte order, we're having a challenge on trying to figure out what kind of appeal periods we're dealing with, because we don't know if everybody got noticed. So probably one of the best things for that to do, and we'll talk a little bit about that, is to mitigate that, is maybe if there is an ex parte order, maybe get everybody to petition to accept it. I believe, oh God, what's the language for it? But if everybody accepts it and consents to it, then, you know, we don't have to worry about any kind of appeal periods. So that's something that we have been talking about with several individuals that have gotten ex parte orders. Do you want to speak about that a little bit, Marcine?
Only to the extent that with the probate side, it's just been super hard, if almost impossible. So I had a transaction that closed very, very, very delayed. It was with Nancy and Brian, and the selling agent had a connection with a family law clerk who actually got an order signed. Otherwise, that escrow still would be open, and it closed 6 weeks ago. It was just painful. That guy called every single day. I have no update on that. I am not seeing anything happen fast on the probate, anything regarding a probate matter.
Judith has a question really quick. Go ahead.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I asked it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions regarding county recorders, getting documents recorded before we move on? Okay.
Okay. Hey, so what are we going to do, or what are we seeing about mitigating delays, and what do we have control over, and what can we expedite? Well, these are the things that we do usually, and we really encourage agents to schedule notaries or advise their clients to schedule notaries early in the escrow. I mean, we used to really jump on that because people were traveling or they have really difficult work schedules. But now part of the problem is we just have very limited local notaries that we can send out, you know, for safety and health reasons. There's a lot of pre-sale items that we can do to help people out. Ordering searches are critical, city reports, NHD, and HOA documents. And just as a reminder, we're finding a lot of the HOA management companies are working remotely. And while I believe requests are down, it's taking, for HOA docs, it's taking actually longer to get them because people are working remotely. And Bill's people have not been, but many of the larger title companies are not staffed in their offices. A lot of those people are working from home One title company that I call to authorize a recording, they close now at lunchtime for an hour and a half, like a doctor's office. So we're finding delays in those areas, and the best thing to do is just be super prepared. You know, if you have a client that's leaving the state, optimum if we can get a hold of them to do wire instructions and documents like that with one of the local notaries, so we understand their circumstances. Lauren? So these are the kind of sales escrow people can expedite. A non-contestant decedent trust sale. I guess the big takeaway word there is if everybody's amicable, and it's like any kind of a transaction, almost anything can be done. But those kind of transactions can happen. IAEA, for those of you that don't know, stand for Independent Administration of Estate Acts. I spoke a little bit about full authority transactions. That's what that category is, and that falls under. They are very easily closed. They do require that an attorney file a notice of proposed action or a waiver if there's no errors or everybody is, you know, on the same page about that. I handle a lot of beneficiary buyouts. Ideally the amicable ones. Not all of them are amicable, but that's, you know, as an example, mom and dad have both died and siblings agree to buy each other out when it's not contentious and they're not disputing something. Those are still happening. And of course, all the regular transactions. Honestly, I just closed today a commercial transaction in San Bernardino, but there is not a lot of commercial happening right now that I'm seeing. Residential resale is like at a low that I haven't seen in probably 10 years, and refinances are, as we've been discussing, kind of booming. So, you know, that's keeping a lot of us busy. It's you know, it is what it is, but resales are pretty much where we're at. Anybody have any questions on anything that we've been talking about, or can we help you with anything? Surprises in your transactional work?
I want to throw one thing out there real quick, and this is just general information. I haven't tried this yet, but I'm also a notary, and I got an email from the National Notary Association, the one on DeSoto. They are selling single-use thumbprints or inker stamps. So they look like a Band-Aid. So rather than for people who are concerned about, you know, either keeping a stamp pad or having clients touch a stamp pad. What? So anyway, they appear to be single-use things. You open them up, you use them for the one transaction, you throw them away. So if anyone wants to try those out, they look interesting.
That's great. Never even heard of that.
Marcine?
Yeah.
It's Nancy. Can you mention briefly, you were talking about beneficiaries buying each other out. Yeah. You were mentioning to me briefly, we talked about this in advance about what happens with property taxes and a way to avoid that reassessment.
With parent, with parent to child transfers, and I was not aware of this. I actually bought my own family home from my sibling, but I have a client located in Pasadena that in order for someone to get the full 100% parent to child benefit, if a property is transferred, they actually have to get short-term financing. I was not aware of that several years ago when I did my own. So my dad's property taxes went from about $600 a year to $2,700 a year because 50% of the property got reassessed. But I have a client that does short-term loans that qualify for the assessor to give a 100% parent-to-child transfer. Kim, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this. I want to throw some additional information to it. So there's two ways to actually pull this up, because the parent-child exclusion works if it's parent to child, or there's a grandparent one too, but sticking with just parent to child. It does not have an exclusion for a sibling to sibling transfer. So if mom has a house for $1 million and it leaves to, you know, Johnny and Susie, and they each get $500,000 worth, and Susie sells to Johnny, that's a 50% reassessment because that's a sibling-sibling transfer. The way to avoid a sibling-sibling transfer is twofold. Either you have enough assets in the estate that are not the house that you can balance. So Susie gets the house for $1 million and Johnny gets the bank account for $1 million, and then then you follow the terms of the transfer. If you do not have sufficient cash to pull that off, then you can do what Marcine is talking about with outside lending. It's complicated, it's tricky. If you do it wrong, you end up with a sibling transfer. It
Right.
has to be done in the trust before the transaction takes place, and the trust has to be the borrower. The problem is lenders don't like to lend to irrevocable trust, which is what you are necessarily dealing with. So you have to have specialized lenders who do this, and the specialized lenders should know the right rules to do it. If you do it wrong, you will find out way downstream that you're getting reassessed, and then you're into a fight. So if you want to attempt, if your goal is to keep the parent-child exclusion, talk to somebody and do it correctly from the front end, because the back end will mess you up. The other really big kicker on a parent-child exclusion is the documents for the parent-child exclusion must be filed before the transfer. You have 3 years before from date of death to do a parent-child exclusion, but it's 3 years or till the transfer of the property to an outside person. So you got to do your timing right, you got to lend to the right entity, and you got to have your right balancing assets. It is not a straightforward transaction. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add on that, Kim, that you got to be really cautious with that financing. You know, we as attorneys walk our clients through the steps. We tell them everything to do, and they still sometimes don't get it right. The financing has to be within the entity. It can't be the buying person or the other person getting the financing. It has to be in the entity, and it has to be transacted and recorded through that process. Now, if you have lenders who'll do short-term lending, they will probably work within the trust, but a lot of lenders won't work within the trust. It's very frustrating for us because there's enough equity in the property to be able to buy something, to buy out the other sibling, but we can't find a lender to be able to do that. So there are a few lenders who'll do it, and the short-term financing lenders will typically do it. But you've also got to let that transaction, get seeded, because you don't want it to look like a step transaction.
Right.
So you got to be really careful.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen somebody do it that way. I just recently found a resource with the
there are a few lenders who advertise that they do interim trust financing. These are not cheap loans, but when you figure out what the value of that property tax is, the value of the cost of the loan becomes insignificant. So don't get hung up on that. But it is, to Wendy's point, you gotta do it right, otherwise it blows.
Right. Thank you.
Well, we have a couple more questions if anyone has any more. If everyone doesn't mind just typing their email address into the chat. I know we have most of yours, but it's easy if we could just grab them all in the same spot. And then if anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask Bill and Marcine, or bring up a topic that's come up that you've seen that you just want to share with the group. Anyone? Okay, well, we will be sending a follow-up email with the 8 software companies and a bunch of the links that were saved, and then with Marcine and Bill copied, so that if you have any specific questions, you could reach out to them directly. And we just wanted to thank you for joining us, and hope everyone has a yummy lunch planned at home.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your intel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.